Hey, this is Mad Movie Mark. Thank you for joining me on my trek through the 1001 movies you must see before you die. This is the 1930s, and these are the 80 films from that decade ranked. Now, I did not include any documentaries for this list. These are just the movies. I will do the documentaries later. I also individually reviewed all these films, so if you want a more in-depth reason as to why I gave these films the score that I did, then you can go watch the individual reviews. Lastly, I have no film school background. I am just a regular person who likes to watch movies. So this ranking will not reflect that of a film school student. It'll reflect that of just the average everyday person. So thank you. And here is my ranking. I absolutely love the paintings of Salvador Dali. I think that he is an absolute amazing artist. But I will admit, I do not get or understand French surrealism. Maybe it's not something you're supposed to get or understand. It's just supposed to be something you take in. It's supposed to be something you feel. It's supposed to be something that sticks with you your entire life, and it's not meant to be interpreted. Maybe that's how it is. I don't know. But I'm just not a fan of this type of film. I'm not a fan of this type of movie. This film talks about the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church, the sexual repression. It does it through dreamlike sequences. There's really no order to anything. It's not linear. None of it is explained. None of it really makes sense. A lot of it is just really bizarre, and you have to put stuff together yourself. And I don't know. It's just a lot of work with no payoff here. I'm just not. And the dreamlike sequences and things that we're seeing, it's just not interesting to me. There's a film called Mirror that also is has dreamlike sequences, and that's something that's more my speed. That's like a 1970s film by Tarkovsky, I think. But this is just not something that I enjoy, and I'm just not a fan of. And I really was just off. It was off-putting to me throughout the entire film. I really just hated it, if I'm going to be honest. Baudu Saved from Drowning is directed by Renoir. Now, there are 4 or 5 films on this list from Renoir, and this is by far my least favorite. The only thing that I like about it is the picture quality. This film looks like it's 20 years ahead of its time. It could have been shot in 1950. A lot of the older 1930s movies, especially the foreign films, are grainy, and they just don't hold up to today. But this movie looks absolutely fantastic. It's the plot that I have an absolute problem with. It's about a tramp who decides he's going to pretend to drown himself. After he pretends to drown himself, a small businessman saves him, and then the tramp, who is Baudu, ends up just destroying this guy's life. He rapes his wife. Now, this guy is no saint either. The businessman has a mistress, so he's not exactly good to his wife, but Baudu rapes this guy's wife, and after he rapes her, she is just so starved for love and affection that she hasn't gotten from her husband. She absolutely loves it. It's like the greatest thing since sliced bread, being raped by Baudu. This movie's supposed to be funny, and I found absolutely none of it to be humorous at all. It's just terrible, in my opinion. The acting is bad. The story is bad. It's not a movie for me. I just basically hated everything about it. Zero for Conduct is a short film. It's like 20 minutes long. It was directed by Jean Vigo. It is basically the Battleship Potemkin set in a school. So it's about children who are in a boarding school. They are repressed. They are treated poorly. They are constantly abused by their teachers. So they decide that they're going to rise up one day and fight their teachers. And it all culminates at the end into a slow motion pillow fight. And the ending is kind of weird because it doesn't really tell you how they're going to hold the school once they have it in their grasp, or what exactly is going to happen. They just take over the school, and they do it in a very shoddy way that doesn't really help them to keep the school for the future. And then the movie ends. This movie isn't that impactful to me. Maybe it's just because Like a lot of these films, there's been other movies that have done similar things like this. They've borrowed a lot from Zero for Conduct, they've refined it, they've done it better, and this one's just not as impactful. I didn't think it was that great a film. I wasn't a huge fan of it. The ending is very off-putting to me, and in like a year, I'm probably going to even forget that I saw this movie. La Talente, I think that's how this film is pronounced. So I've been told by a couple of different people that I just don't understand this movie, that I don't get it, I'm misrepresenting what it says, and that I'm just completely wrong. And I'm okay to accept that if that is correct, but this is just how I feel about this film. To me, this is a movie about a woman who is a newlywed, who is emotionally and psychologically abused by her husband on their honeymoon. The reason why I say that is because they get married, they go to the big city on this barge or this boat. When they get there, they go out to a restaurant. She is hit on by a person at the restaurant. Her husband gets incredibly upset and mad and says that she is no longer able to get off the boat for the rest of the night. Meanwhile, he goes off the boat, he goes into the big city, and he has a good time. Now she, of course, this is one of the first times she will ever be able to see the big city. She may never be able to see it again because transportation is not what it was back then. It's not what it was today. This may be the only opportunity she gets. So she goes out into the big city. She defies what her husband says. He gets very upset at her. He leaves her in the city by herself to fend for herself without a job, without a way to get home. And he leaves and takes the boat with him. And then like halfway home, he realizes he made a bad decision and he goes back to her. And she's like looking for a job. She's trying to figure out how she's going to survive on her own. And when he gets there, she takes him back. And when she took him back, I'm like, you fool! Why did you take him back? I just, maybe, like I said, I probably don't understand this film, but it's not a great love story to me. It's a red flag story, that this guy's a red flag and you shouldn't be in a relationship with him. And this movie just made me angry. So that is why it's at the bottom of my list. Thank you. It's a Gift is supposed to be a comedy. It stars W.C. Fields as a man who dreams of buying an orange grove. So he buys one in California, sight unseen, and he forces his family to uproot their lives to go to this orange grove where he plans on maintaining it and living there because he saw an ad that had beautiful orange groves, and it was like, come live the California dream and buy your own orange grove and be filthy rich. And so, of course, this doesn't work out as he thinks it's going to work out. There's one scene in this film where W.C. Fields is working in this grocery store that he owns, and there's like a blind guy who walks in, and he just creates all this chaos because he has like the blind walking stick and he's like waving it around and breaking things, and W.C. Fields is like quietly having a nervous breakdown because of all the stuff that's being broken. I thought that sequence, that scene of the film was absolutely hilarious, but it's really the only time in this whole movie that I really laughed at all. I didn't think it was that good. I reviewed another W.C. Fields film as well. I don't remember what it was called, but this one I thought was so much worse than the other one. I wasn't a huge fan of this. Son of the Desert is a Laurel and Hardy film, which I honestly didn't find to be funny in any way. Maybe it's just not my kind of comedy that they're doing on screen. I think the Marx Brothers are so much more funnier, so much more hilarious than Laurel and Hardy are in this film. There's also a very weird scene where they're like at a lodge and there's this really annoying guy who's part of the lodge who thinks he's hilarious, and it's just really awkward and terrible to watch. And I don't know, I don't think I laughed once during this film. I just think that maybe it's aged badly, but I'm not at all a fan of Son of the Desert, Laurel and Hardy. She Done Him Wrong is a film starring Mae West. I think that it's the only film with her on this list. I don't know if she has any more movies coming up in the 40s, but I believe for the 30s, this was the only one that she was in. It also stars Cary Grant in his first role, which is an interesting story. At the time Mae West wanted to make this film, all the lead actors were busy doing other things. So she was told that they would have to wait months in order to find an actor to fill the lead role. And she saw Cary Grant outside and she said, "Well, what about that guy?" And they said, "Well, that guy, he's not even a star. He hasn't done any movies. Like he's just like a bit actor." And they're like, and she said, "If he can talk, I want him." So they put Cary Grant in the movie, and that is basically Hollywood history. We all know the career that Cary Grant went to have. But I thought that this movie, I think that at the end of the film, there's supposed to be a big reveal, but it's incredibly easy to guess and to know what that reveal is. I also did not believe in the love story in this film at all. At no point did I think that there actually was a love story, but at the end of the film, they're like, that was a love story. So the ending is kind of nonsensical. The big reveal just wasn't there for me. This, of course, has the very famous line from Mae West where she says, like, "Why don't you come up and see me?" But besides that, this film really, I don't think is good at all. Famous for the line and famous because it's like Cary Grant's first film, but I just don't think it's that great of a movie, or I don't think it's that good of a movie, to be honest. Love Me Tonight is a musical comedy starring Maurice Chevalier. This so far is the only movie I've run into starring him, so I don't know if there's going to be any from the 1940s, but if you're familiar with I Love Lucy, then you've at least probably heard of Maurice Chevalier before. But I thought the plot of this movie was a little stale. It's one of those situations that I've been running into a little bit with the 1930s, where there's a movie that you could tell it laid the groundwork for future films because it has a plot that I'm sure was unique at the time and was hilarious at the time, but other movies throughout the decades have just built on it so much and refined it and made it so much more funny and so much better that when I watch something like this, I appreciate what they're doing because I'm sure this was hilarious during its time, but it's just lost a little bit to me over the decades because other movies have just really done it so much better. There is a scene, I will say, where Maurice Chevalier is trying to ride a horse, which is absolutely hysterical. But besides that, I didn't think the acting was anything to write home about. Like I said, I thought the plot was just something that I didn't find all that interesting. I'm sure it was back then. The songs are okay, but it's just kind of a movie that's there. I'm not a huge fan of it at all. The Story of a Cheat is about a charming scoundrel who narrates his life of crime. I thought this movie had a very strong, very impactful opening, but as the movie went on, I became more and more kind of annoyed by it. It's narrated by a single person. There's no like music in this film, so it's just his voice and just his narration. And I felt that he was very monotone and very dull and very uninspiring. And I really didn't think that this was the right person who should be narrating this movie because he really puts you to sleep. And I really think that's sad because this movie could have been a lot more than it was. With things to come, I think there's going to be a pattern on this list where these films that are lower I thought were kind of boring and kind of slow, and I just really couldn't get into it at all. There's really not any great acting in it. The characters are just okay, but there's no real standouts at all. And this film, the standout is probably the special effects and the use of tanks and airplanes and different large vehicles. This movie basically predicted World War II, and it's very visually stunning. There's a lot of really awesome set pieces in this film, but I would say that the acting and the storylines, it's just all muddled to me, and I'm just not a huge fan of it, and it was just so slow. I'm okay with some slow films. I mean, I watched Satin Tango and gave it like an 8.5, and that's 8 hours long. So I'm not always a fan of slow, long movies. I just didn't think this one was entertaining. It wasn't the cinematography wasn't good enough to really for me to get into it like something like Satin Tango. It just wasn't doing enough camera wise. I didn't like it. I wasn't a huge fan. The Rules of the Game is one of those films that I think people are going to hate on me for if you're a huge fan of Wind War. There are movies of his that I really like. The Grand Illusion will come up soon in this list. A Day in the Country is going to be on this list. I'm just not a fan of this film. So essentially, there's a weekend hunting party that's going on, and there's a lot of different characters, a lot of different people who are at this hunting party. This movie involves a lot of backstabbing, a lot of adultery, and at the end of the film, it also involves a murder. It's funny at times. I'm not a huge fan of the hunting scenes. That's just not something that I agree with, and there's a lot of hunting scenes in this film, which I just wasn't a huge fan of. I didn't really enjoy the plot either. I just thought it kind of was slow and boring, and I had a really hard time getting into this movie. And I know that a lot of people love it, but it's not for me at all. The Bitter Tea of General Yin is, I would say, either a lesser known or a completely unknown film directed by Frank Capra, who of course did such greats as It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, It Happened One Night. He was one of my favorite directors of all time, but this is one of his films that I am really just not a fan of, which is crazy because he's one of my favorite directors of all time. It stars one of my top 2 favorite actresses of all time, which is Barbara Stanwyck. It also stars Niels Astor, but this film just doesn't work. It has a love story which I don't really understand, I don't agree with, I don't really believe. It also uses yellowface, although it's a black and white film. It does use yellowface, where it has a white actor playing someone who is of Chinese descent, which also I'm not a fan of. I'm sure that there was other actors at the time that they could have gotten for this role, because he doesn't say or do a whole lot, and I'm pretty sure someone else could have done this. But also, the true villain of this film is China. And because China was like completely unknown at the time, everyone thought it was like this cesspool of crime and debauchery. And I don't know, I just wasn't a huge fan of it. He does better films much later in his career, but this is just not a movie that I jived with at all. The Public Enemy is a gangster film starring James Cagney and Tom Powers. It is about a young, ruthless bootlegger who rises through the Chicago underworld during Prohibition. I love James Cagney. I think he is a great actor. I think the problem with a lot of his early gangster films for me is that I saw White Heat, and White Heat is just my favorite gangster film of all time. I think James Cagney just rises to a level in that film that is unmatched. And I think that these earlier gangster films kind of lay the groundwork for White Heat, for what he's going to do later. But these movies are fine. They're really good. A lot of the plot lines are the same. He's a fantastic actor. He really brings a lot of emotion, a lot of grit to the screen. I'm just not a huge fan of the plots, and I think they're fine movies. I don't think that they are great personally. Top Hat is a movie that I've been told I am completely wrong about. There will be other films on this list that I am told that same thing, that I am completely wrong about this movie. It stars Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, who are both incredible actors and dancers. This movie, for me, was really about a case of mistaken identity that lasted for like an hour and a half. And there were tons of places and tons of instances where this case of mistaken identity should have been figured out, but it just kept going and just kept dragging just to push the plot around. And I was like, come on, guys, like this can't be the entire hour and a half of this film is just this case of mistaken identity. But it was, and for me it was just incredibly annoying. I think because I grew up in the 90s, I was born in the 80s, but I'll say like I really grew up in the late 80s, 90s. This was like a very long episode of Three's Company for me. Like I could watch a half an hour episode of Three's Company and be more satisfied with that case of mistaken identity than this one. Now maybe this is where Three's Company got its inspiration from, but I just was not a fan of this film at all. The Black Cat, I think, is most famous for pairing two horror icons together. We have Boris Karloff, who of course played Frankenstein, Bela Lugosi, who played Dracula. This is a film about two newlyweds who get stranded and end up in the home of a sinister architect. That architect is played by Boris Karloff. Bela Lugosi's character is afraid of cats. For some reason, I think it's his character that's afraid of cats. It's not really fleshed out as to why or why it even matters. The end of the movie, it kind of matters. There's like a scene where his fear of cats kind of pushes the plot around a little bit, but this film is very confusing, and at least it was to me. It's just all over the place, and although I love Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi individually as Frankenstein and Dracula, they just didn't work together for me for some reason. I just didn't think they had very good chemistry, and it's just a movie that doesn't work and a movie that I wasn't a huge fan of. Limite is a film that is considered to be one of the greatest Brazilian films ever put to screen. It is completely silent. There's only 3 title cards, and to be honest, the version I watched, it didn't have any subtitles for those title cards, so I had no idea what they said. So you basically just have to use mood, atmosphere, and visual symbolism to tell what's going on. This is told in a non-linear fashion. I thought the cinematography was absolutely amazing. The music is also great. My only complaint is that it's like over 2 hours long. For a film that's over 2 hours long, that's like dreary. It's very sad. It's completely silent, like I said. You kind of have to piece things together and figure out what's going on. It just, maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind or in the mood for that kind of film, but it was just, I felt that it was just long and boring and just dragged. It's just not the kind of movie that I enjoy. It wasn't for me, but I do appreciate the cinematography, the music, and I also appreciate the fact that it's completely silent. They were going for something different. The director of this film never directed another film after this, never directed another film before this. The main actors in this film never did a movie before this, never did a movie after this. So for all these people involved, it was a one and done film, and I think they did it. I think it's pretty good. It's just not a film that I enjoy. Swing Time is a musical starring the iconic duo of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. In this film, Fred Astaire plays a gambler who must earn $25,000 in order to marry his fiancée, but he ends up falling in love with a dance instructor instead. That dance instructor played by Ginger Rogers. I think Fred Astaire is a great actor. I think Ginger Rogers is a fantastic actress. They complement each other very well. They have incredible chemistry. They're both two of the greatest dancers who ever lived. My only problem is I usually absolutely hate the plot of every Fred Astaire film, and I despise almost every character that he plays. There's something about the characters that he plays that come off as smug to me, and they just don't work. I'm just not a huge fan. That's true with this film as well. I love both of what they're doing. I'm just not a fan of the plot or of his character at all. Gunga Din is an adventure war film starring Cary Grant, Victor McLaglen, and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. They play 3 soldiers in India who team up with a local named Gunga Din to fight off a murderous cult. Now, I think that Cary Grant is best in his comedies, and this is more of a serious film. I also think he's best when he's opposite a female lead, and this is only 3 men or I guess 4 men, who are the lead in this film. I think it's okay. It's an action-adventure film. It definitely inspired future great films such as Indiana Jones. I just don't think it's all that spectacular. The acting's okay, but it's not great. It's really long. It's kind of a long movie, or at least it feels really long. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, but it's an okay film. It's not my favorite with him. It's not my least favorite film with Cary Grant either, but I still give it a 7.5 out of 10. Angels with Dirty Faces is a gangster film starring James Cagney. James Cagney did a lot of gangster films in his time, and this is one of his most iconic performances. It also stars Pat O'Brien as a father slash priest or preacher as well. This is about two friends. They're childhood friends, and as they get older, they take different paths in life. James Cagney's character is Rocky, and he becomes like a gangster slash mobster in the film. Pat O'Brien becomes the father who tries to save the children and save the town, and it's the conflict that rises between them. I think this movie is really good. James Cagney is the quintessential mobster slash gangster. He is like the blueprint mobster. He's in like all the big gangster films, and I think he does a very good job here. This is my lowest 8 out of 10, I believe, and I think it's just a solid gangster film. Earth is a Soviet silent film that depicts the conflict between landowners and something called the New Collective, and there is a big deal made about a new tractor that the landowners get that becomes a central focal point of this film at some point. It has great cinematography in it. It has fantastic visuals. It discusses a lot about life and death. I think it's a pretty good movie. I'm going to be honest, it's from 1930. I reviewed it probably 10 months ago. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember that it is visually stunning, and I definitely remember the tractor in my head as well. Song at Midnight is often cited as the first ever Chinese horror film, and it is heavily inspired by the American movie Phantom of the Opera. This movie has a very gothic atmosphere. It can be chilling at times, it can be scary at times, but it can also be incredibly confusing at times. Also, I think the acting is very well done. I think this is a very great entrance into the horror movie genre for China. It's also inspired by, for me, one of the greatest silent films ever made, which is Phantom of the Opera. It's hard to really compare yourself to that because you can't. Phantom of the Opera is just like, it's so high on a pedestal that if that's what they were trying to do, there's no way they could have ever reached that pinnacle. But I think this movie is still pretty good. There's parts of it that I just don't really get or understand, but I still think it is an 8 out of 10. Daybreak is a film starring Gene Gabin. When this film opens up, we learn that Gabin has murdered someone inside of his apartment. The man who is being killed rushes out of the apartment, falls down the stairs, and dies. Gabin then locks himself inside of his apartment, refusing to let anyone in, including the cops. And then we learn as he paces back and forth, we have flashbacks as to what happened. It basically involves a very messy love triangle. Gabin is someone who works tirelessly every day, and this woman that was in his life is really the only thrill, the only excitement that he has, and he is very sad and depressed when he learns that this woman is dating someone else. This movie is famous for its fading in and out, which wasn't something that was new back then, but it's definitely something that was not used to the extent that this movie uses it. I think the acting is really good. I obviously love Gabin in almost everything that he is in. It's just very slow paced for me. A lot of stuff doesn't always happen. But besides that, I think it's a really great concept. It's a really great idea. I just personally don't think it was executed as great as it could have been, but it's still an 8 out of 10. Captains Courageous stars Spencer Tracy, Freddie Bartholomew, and Lionel Barrymore. It is about a spoiled teenager who falls off a luxury ship liner and is rescued by a fishing boat where he is forced to work, learn responsibility, learn humility, and learn about an honest day's pay. This film, Spencer Tracy won Best Actor in a Lead Role. I think that he did a great job in this film, but I thought it should have gone to Paul Muni for the life of Emile Zola, but this movie is very good. It has a touching relationship between Spencer Tracy and Freddie Bartholomew's character. They are like a father and son type of relationship. I thought the ending was kind of weird. I don't necessarily agree with it, but the middle of the film is really spectacular. There's some on the edge of your seat stuff going on here. Tremendous acting, great cinematography, and it's a solid 8 out of 10. A Day in the Country is a film by Renoir. It's a very short film. It's like 45 or 50 minutes long. It is about a family that consists of a mother, a daughter who is like in her late teens, early 20s, a father, and the daughter's fiance. Now they go off into the country to have a nice day, and while they're there, two gentlemen spot the mother and the daughter, and they decide that they are going to find an opportunity to get these two alone so that they can make out with them and have a nice day with them away from their partners. They eventually make this happen, and one of the women, I won't say which woman, one of the women falls in love with the guy who whisks her away. Do they ultimately stay together, or does she stay with the partner that she originally came with? I won't ruin the story for you. I will say that this isn't like the greatest film I've ever seen, but it has really fantastic cinematography in it. It's mostly shot outside on a lake, and it just looks beautiful. The acting is also really good. It's really well written. It's just a very like middle ground movie for me, and usually if I don't hate it or love it, I give it an 8 out of 10, and that's what I'm giving it here. Wuthering Heights from 1939. Yes, I know there is a newer version of this film, and I hear that it is absolutely terrible, but this version is not terrible. It stars Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff and Merle Oberman as his love interest. I don't remember her name at the moment. This is about a doomed romance between two people and the social barriers that keep them apart. I thought the acting in this movie is absolutely phenomenal. That's really what you get from everything Laurence Olivier is in, and I think the cinematography is beautiful. There's some really great like scenes of a cliff in this film. The black and white is amazing. I think it's just a very nice love story, a very nice doomed love story, and you know, where would we be at in society if we didn't have doomed love stories that we can compare with our own? 42nd Street is a musical about a demanding director who discovers a new star played by Ruby Keeler, who must take the lead when the original star is injured. This film is beautifully acted by Ruby Keeler. She's in a lot of these early musicals, and she is just a phenomenal dancer, a phenomenal singer. She was the like it girl when it came to musicals during the 1930s. This movie also has really good song and dance numbers, and it's just a fine musical. I don't think it has that emotional impact that later musicals on this list will have, but it's still a very fine musical, and I give it an 8 out of 10. The Thin Man is a movie about a detective starring William Powell and his wife, who is played by Myrna Joy. He reluctantly agrees to solve a murder while drinking martinis and being like drunk throughout most of the film. This movie is very famous for its witty dialogue. It's incredibly fast-paced, and there is a great, absolutely great relationship between Myrna Joy and William Powell. They probably have the best chemistry of any couple on screen out of the entire 1930s list. In fact, their chemistry was so good it spawned like 20 other Thin Man films. That's not the correct number, but a lot of other Thin Man films. I think that as far as the detectiveness goes and solving the crime, things come together at the end a little too sloppily for me. Like, you don't actually see the full thought process that William Powell is going through. You don't see all the evidence that is collected. So at the end of the film, when he finally decides who the murderer is, you're just like, okay, sure. But I thought that the chemistry that these two people have on screen was absolutely amazing. It is a funny film. There's a lot of really comedic parts. I just didn't like the detective part of it, and I also didn't like the fact that he's depicted as someone who can very clearly think and solve this film while always drunk. It doesn't work for me always, but I still think it's good enough for an 8 out of 10. Camille is a film starring Greta Garbo and Robert Taylor. It is a fantastic love story. It is heartbreaking at the end of the film. It involves Greta Garbo's character falling in love with a young man while she at the time is dying of something called consumption. So she has to choose whether she's going to marry for love or if she's going to marry someone else who's in love with her. But she's not in love with him, but he is filthy rich. And at the end, it ends up being incredibly tragic. I love Greta Garbo's acting. I thought Robert Taylor was great in this film as well. I love a movie with a tragic ending, and this one definitely has a tragic ending, and I thought it was very well done. In Blood is a swashbuckler movie that is famous for launching the careers of Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland, two people who will work together a lot throughout their careers. In fact, we will see them both later on in a film called The Adventures of Robin Hood, and we will see Olivia de Havilland play one of the greatest characters in one of the greatest films of all time called Gone with the Wind. This movie also stars Basil Rathbone as the villain. This movie is about Peter Blood, who is unjustly sentenced to slavery for treating a wounded rebel. He ends up escaping and he becomes an honorable pirate. I thought this film was very well done, and Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland do a great job for their roles that launched them into stardom. I really thought it was a very good movie. Vampire is a film that's directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer, who I really have a love-hate relationship with. This film I don't necessarily love, I don't necessarily hate. I just think that it is a very good film with a lot of dreamlike sequences in it. It is about a student who stumbles into a French village that is cursed by a vampire. There is also a woman in this village who is slowly turning into a vampire. There's a really cool scene in this film that really sticks with me. I probably watched this movie like 7 or 8 months ago. It's one of the very early films from the 1930s, and this image still sticks in my head of the title, the main character being carried in a coffin while still alive, and he can look up and he sees what's going on like in the sky above him as he's being carried through this coffin. He sees like the trees above him and everything that you would see if you were looking up out of it, and it really stuck with me. It's a very fantastic visual scene, and I think this movie is just really well done. There's also there's a book that he opens up in this film that talks about like what a vampire is and what a vampire isn't, and it's also a very good learning tool if you're not that familiar with like history of vampires. I know that's really weird to say, but I felt that it was that way, but I just think this is a pretty good vampire movie. The Story of the Last Chrysanthemum, I think, is the earliest Japanese talkie film that I've ever seen. I've definitely seen earlier Japanese films than this, but they were all silent. So I think this is the earliest Japanese talkie film I've ever seen. It revolves around an actor who is basically a Nepo baby. His father is a famous actor. He owns his own acting troupe. He's like involved. He's like head of an acting troupe. And it's assumed that his son, the star of this film, is going to take over once his father passes away. However, his son is actually a very bad actor. Now, everyone to his face tells him he is fantastic. He is the greatest actor who ever lived. He is going to one day rise above his father and become the greatest actor in Japan. But behind his back, they all talk about how bad he is and how terrible of an actor he actually is. Now, this all happens until one day his brother's wet nurse approaches him and tells him, "You're actually a really bad actor. Like, I hate to tell you this, but you are terrible at what you do." Now, the son, the actor, is very thankful that someone finally tells him the truth, that he is not good at what he does, and that there's someone who will tell him to his face and not behind his back, and he ends up falling in love with this woman, and he ends up deciding that he's going to get rid of his dad's name and try to make it as an actor himself. And she is going to follow him in good times and in bad, through the highs and the lows, and they will go on this journey together. I won't say too much about how the journey goes or what ends up at the end of the journey, but I will just say that this is a great romance film. It is tragic. The ending ends up being very sad, but probably not in the way that you would think. The acting is phenomenal, and I really think that this is quite a good early Japanese talkie film. Shanghai Express is a film starring Marlene Dietrich as Shanghai Lily, who is a high-paid sex worker, essentially. While on a train, she runs into an old flame, and the train eventually gets commandeered by a gentleman who wants to basically hold all these people for a ransom of sort. I don't want to go too much into what the motives are and what goes on this train. I will just say the cinematography in this film is absolutely amazing. The acting is also really good. You can expect just a phenomenal performance in almost everything that Marlene Dietrich is in. And I think that this is not her best film. There are like 4 or 5 films of hers that I think are better, but this is still a very good film from Marlene Dietrich. I think everyone knows who Dracula is. He is one of the most iconic horror/monster characters in all of cinema history. If you close your eyes and you imagine what Dracula looks like and you hear what Dracula sounds like, you will automatically see and hear Bela Lugosi. He is the blueprint for all Draculas going forward. But I would like to say that for me, this movie is all about Dwight Frye, who plays Rainsfield. He does an absolute phenomenal job. He has the most emotion. He has the most range. To me, he is the best actor in this film, and it's not even close. And I think it is really sad that Bela Lugosi's character is so iconic that he overshadows what Dwight Frye is doing in this film, because he steals the show, and I think he should be given more credit than he is, because he did such a fantastic job. I think he made this movie for me. I think he's the best part of the movie, to be perfectly honest. An Awful Truth is a comedy starring Cary Grant and Irene Dunne, and in this film we have a married couple who are going through a divorce, and as they're going through a divorce, they decide to start dating other people. They realize that they still love each other though, and because of this, they each of them decides they're going to sabotage the other person's new relationship. Now, this movie is funny. I think it is most funny when Irene Dunne is sabotaging Cary Grant's relationship. I didn't find Cary Grant's sabotage as funny, but Irene Dunne's is comedy gold. I think she does an incredible job here. I love Cary Grant's comedies. Before I started this list, I wasn't a huge fan of Cary Grant, but I think his comedies are fantastic. He does really great physical comedy where he's like tumbling over chairs and falling out of things, and it is absolutely hilarious. And I think he does his best work when he's opposite another woman. When he's opposite another woman. I already talked about Gunga Din, where it was just an all-male cast, and I didn't think he was as good in that. But in this film, I think he is hilarious, and I think it is a nice, funny comedy. My Man Godfrey reminds me a little bit of the show Arrested Development. This movie stars William Powell and Carol Lombard. In this film, William Powell is a homeless man. He is considered a forgotten man in this film, and he is hired by Lombard's family to be a butler. Now, a lot of the butlers have quit before they even really started in this family, because his family is very eccentric. They have a rich father, children who refuse to work, who don't want to work, who kind of live off their parents, which is kind of the Arrested Development part of this film. But they also have this back and forth funny banter with each other that also reminds me of that show. So while William Powell's character is being a butler, he kind of learns about the family members and kind of exposes who they really are. I think this film is funny. It's definitely, there's funny moments. It's definitely not as consistently funny as something like Bringing Up Baby, but I do think it's better than his other movie that he's famous for, which is The Thin Man. And a lot of it is because of the family dynamic, how funny the family is back and forth with each other, the chemistry they have with each other. I think this is a good movie. I definitely recommend it if you just want to see a funny movie set during the Great Depression. The Footlight Parade is a musical that, with like a lot of the early 1930 films, it takes place during the Great Depression and talks about the heartaches and the struggles that people had during the Great Depression. Now, this film stars James Cagney, Joan Blondell, Ruby Keeler, and I'm going to preface this by saying I've never seen Yankee Doodle Dandy, though I've heard that James Cagney is a phenomenal dancer. I didn't realize how good he was until I saw this movie, and boy can James Cagney dance. And I'm starting to think, is he one of the most versatile actors of the 1930s, where he can do gangster mob films and do musicals where he's dancing like this? Absolutely phenomenal. Not to mention Ruby Keeler, who was also in a lot of these musicals back then, as well as Joan Blondell. Very, very fantastic dancers in their own right. This movie has great elaborate scenes. It has like kaleidoscope views that were revolutionary during that time. Great song and dance numbers. My only gripe about this movie is that in this film, James Cagney characters creates these prologues for movies, and I'm not really sure how they would work in real life. Like, it just seems like it wouldn't. And the whole film, I'm trying to wrap around my head around, like, is this actually something that they could do? It just doesn't seem like it. But besides that, the film is great. I love James Cagney's dancing, and I just think that he's incredibly versatile. Little Caesar is a gangster slash mobster film that follows the blueprint of a lot of gangster slash mobster films from this era. You have a small time crook who rises to the ranks of one of the highest people in the mob, and then he ends up getting stricken down by his own hubris and the fact that he thinks that he is untouchable. This one stars Edward G. Robinson. I think for these gangster films, it's all about how much you like that lead actor and how great they are at their role. And I think Edward G. Robinson did a very good job here. I'm not a huge fan of gangster slash mob movies. My favorite of all time is White Heat, but I think that this one is very good and it deserves an 8.5. What can you say about the movie Frankenstein? It is one of the greatest monster films of all time. It launched a franchise. It is one of the greatest horror films of all time. It is done in the early 1930s, so the sound is still not perfect, but Boris Karloff is the greatest Frankenstein ever. No one else can do it like him. That was perfect casting. Colin Clive as the scientist also does an amazing job. There's a lot of tense on the edge of your seat things in this film. I think that is absolutely phenomenal, but there is still a monster film that is just a little bit better, and that one is coming up next. Bride of Frankenstein is the sequel to Frankenstein, and this one picks up exactly where the other one left off. And in this film, there is a big build-up to the end when you finally see the Bride of Frankenstein for like 2 minutes in the entire film. This movie, you can clearly tell this movie has a much higher production value, a much higher budget. The sound is a lot better. The first Frankenstein was done in the early parts of introducing sound to movies, so the sound quality is better. Everything is just a level higher in this film than it was in Frankenstein, but you have the same fantastic acting, you have the same great writing. Everything is phenomenal. I was just put off by the fact that you only see the Bride of Frankenstein for only a couple minutes. She only does a bunch of shrieking. There's like no talking, which I understand why she does that, but I could have used more of that title character in this film than just the last couple minutes. But besides that, I love Frankenstein. He's my favorite of the monsters. I have a Frankenstein tattoo on my back, so I love him. And I thought this film was one step better than Frankenstein, just because you could tell that they did a lot with the technology that they received in the later years after the first one was done. Destiny Rides Again stars my favorite actor of all time, James Stewart, in his first major Western role. Now, I think a lot of people remember him from big dramas such as Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, It's a Wonderful Life. Maybe you know him from Hitchcock films like Vertigo or Rear Window, but he's also a very prolific Western actor, and this is his first big starring Western role. It also stars Marlene Dietrich, whose career was kind of on a downslide at this point, and they recommended that she do this Western, which she did not want to do because she thought she really didn't have a place in Westerns, and this ended up revitalizing her career as well. And the pairing of James Stewart and Marlene Dietrich is absolutely phenomenal in this film. It is hilarious. James Stewart plays a character who is the son of a famous sheriff who was killed, and now the town needs a new sheriff, so they ask him to come be the sheriff. But he's not like the gun-toting strong man that they think he is, like his dad was. He's actually someone who refuses to carry a gun, so he's more like future Sheriff Andy Taylor than he is his father. And it's just really well written. It's really well acted. You put these two people in a film together, and of course the acting is going to be phenomenal. I think their love relationship is very believable, and I just think that it is a very solid Western. It's not my favorite James Stewart Western. There are like maybe 3 or 4 that I would put ahead of this, but this is what started it all, and it is just a very good film. Jezebel is a film with an acting tour de force by Bette Davis, and I think when you see her name and a credit on a movie, you have to realize that you are watching a film with one of the greatest female actresses of all time doing what she does best, and that is command a screen. And in this film, Bette Davis commands the screen. Now, it also stars Henry Fonda, who is no slouch himself. I feel that him and James Stewart have the most movies on this list. I might be wrong about that, but it definitely feels that way. So this movie is about Bette Davis. She plays a rebellious Southern belle, and her rebellious nature causes her to lose her fiance, and she basically just tries the whole film to get him back, but he ends up marrying someone else, and it causes a lot of depression and emotions from Bette Davis's character, and her whole lot in life throughout the entire film is to just win him back and regain that love that she lost. Now, I say it's her rebellious nature. I personally don't think she really did anything wrong, but I'm looking at things through a 2026 lens. It was much different in those times back then, but she gives such a powerful performance in this film. This movie is often regarded as like a poor man's Gone with the Wind. I don't really understand that. I think that they are two very different films. Maybe it's because you have two female leads who command the screen for the entire film, but I think they're just very different, and I think this film is very good, but it is no Gone with the Wind, that's for sure. Only Angels Have Wings is directed by one of the greatest directors of all time, Howard Hawks, and if you don't believe me, just go look at the films that he directed. It is absolutely astonishing how many perfect movies this director did in his life. It stars Cary Grant, Rita Hayworth, Jean Arthur, and Thomas Mitchell. This is probably one of my favorite serious Cary Grant films. I'm not a huge fan of Cary Grant, but I absolutely think he is phenomenal in this movie, as well as Jean Arthur, Rita Hayworth, and Thomas Mitchell. In this film, Cary Grant and Thomas Mitchell play pilots who deliver mail, but they deliver mail in a very remote island, and it's very unsafe, very difficult, very treacherous for them to fly and in these conditions, it's always very windy or very rainy, or the conditions are terrible to fly, but they fly anyway to deliver the mail and to deliver packages and to make sure things get to where they're going. And the movie is basically the danger of them doing this job and of Jean Arthur falling in love with Cary Grant's character. I absolutely love this film. I think it is just fantastic. Ninotchka is a film starring Greta Garbo, one of the finest female actresses in all of cinema. And in this movie, she plays a Russian envoy who is sent to Paris to secure the sale of some jewels that were seized by Russia. Now, she runs into a gentleman played by Melvyn Douglas, who is supposed to stop the sale of those jewels, but at first she does not know that he is that person, and they start falling in love with each other. And then once she realizes that he is on the other side of this deal that she's supposed to be making, she tries to cut the relationship off right away. But he says, I don't care who gets the jewels, I don't care which one of us wins. I love you, and I think that we should focus on our relationship. And that is basically the crux of this movie, I would say. I absolutely love their relationship in this film. When Melvyn Douglas's character first meets Ninotchka, you can see in his eyes that he is absolutely falling in love with her, that he is enamored by her, and that he is going to do everything in his power to fall in love with her and have her fall in love with him. Their chemistry is unmatched in this film, and I absolutely think that it is hilarious. I think it's Greta Garbo's first comedy that she did, but this movie is funny. All the side characters are also really great and charming, and I just think that this is one of the best comedies of 1939. Trouble in Paradise is a film about a gentleman thief and a lady pickpocket who end up falling in love one day when they realize that they've each stolen multiple items off of each other, and they've realized they've met that one person in their life who really gets them. Now they decide that they're going to try to steal the jewels and money off this really rich woman, and to do this, the gentleman thief is going to try to woo this woman, and he ends up falling in love with her. This movie is absolutely hilarious. The two leads in this film have great chemistry together, and I just really think this movie works really well. The plot is unique, and I just think it's all around a really good film. The 39 Steps is a film directed by my personal favorite director of all time, Alfred Hitchcock. It stars Robert Donat, who is sent on an international espionage trek after a woman is murdered in her apartment. When you finally figure out what's going on in this film and who the actual villain is, and everything kind of comes together, it is one of the greatest reveals of all time to me. I absolutely love it. And then at the end, there's a line where Robert Donat says, "What are the 39 steps?" It's like I almost fell out of my chair the first time I saw him say that on film. It was absolutely phenomenal. And I will say this a lot while reviewing Alfred Hitchcock films. He just knows how to end a movie. He knows how to wrap it up, and he knows how to just knock you off your chair, how to surprise you, how to shock you. I love his films. He is my favorite director of all time. He just does on the edge of your seat type movies that are tense, that just keep you wondering what's happening and what's going on and how this is all going to come together. He does it better than anyone else, and I think that this is a great film. The Life of Emile Zola is a film that won Best Picture at the Academy Awards, and it was nominated for Best Actor in a Lead Role for Paul Muni's portrayal of Emile Zola. And I think this is the movie that really shows his acting chops and how much range he has as an actor. He was absolutely phenomenal in this film. The beginning of this movie chronicles the life of Emile Zola, from his very humble, very poor beginnings to writing his first book, to kind of rising into fame and becoming very rich and people actually caring about what he has to say. Now, there's this guy named Dreyfus who is a Jewish member of the military, and he is convicted of a crime while as an officer, and he is put in prison. Now, Dreyfuss's wife begs Zola to write about this and to talk about how her husband was wrongfully convicted of this crime. And eventually Zola decides to do this, and he himself is also convicted of basically writing things that they say are not true about the military, and then he ends up going to trial. This film is absolutely phenomenal. Today, it's not considered to be one of the great Best Picture winners, and a lot of that is because the reason why Dreyfuss was convicted of this and why they accused him of all of this was because he was Jewish. And the movie does not really talk about that at all. There's one scene in the film where they're going through a list of the names of people that they can wrongfully convict, and the name says Dreyfuss and then Jewish under it, and that's when they're like, that's the guy, that's the one we want to convict. And that's the only thing they mentioned about him being Jewish. In real life, though, it was a big deal that he was Jewish. It was the whole reason why this happened. And this movie kind of gets a bad rap for glossing over that and not really talking about it. That aside, I think this is just a phenomenal performance by Paul Muni. I think it is a great, touching movie. It is emotional, and I just really enjoyed every minute of it. The Gold Diggers of 1933. I think this is my second favorite musical of the 1930s. A lot of the films from the 1930s, especially the early films, I want to say from like 1930 to somewhere around 1935, 1936, all revolve heavily around the Great Depression and the different ways that the Great Depression impacted different sects of society. Now, this film is about a group of girls who are struggling during the Great Depression. They are having a very hard time making ends meet, of putting food on the table, of buying clothes, of doing absolutely anything because they are all completely broke. Now, they are singers and dancers. They end up all together getting involved with a wealthy man who is putting on his own show, and they get starring roles in the show, and while they're doing this, they find love and romance. It has incredible dance sequences at the end of the film, and I really love the story in this movie. I really love it's in the backdrop of the Great Depression. It really shows how much people struggled during that time, and I just think that with musicals, you don't always have that sort of raw type of story and plot line to it. And this one, I think, just does an incredible job. The acting is also phenomenal, and it has some of the greatest sequences of dancing that I've ever seen in a film. Freedom for Us is a comedy/drama about two people who escape from prison. After they escape, one becomes a very successful factory owner, and the other ends up working for the very successful factory owner. Now, the one who is a success is constantly like looking behind his back because he escaped from prison, so he's worried that one day he's going to have to go back. Now, I think this movie is hilarious. There are a lot of really funny comedy bits between these two characters. They have great chemistry together. They play off each other really well. I was just incredibly dissatisfied with the ending of this film. I go into that in more detail in my long-form review of this movie, but besides the ending, I absolutely love this movie. I think it is hilarious and fantastic. It would probably be a 10 out of 10 if I thought the ending was more satisfying. Now, the ending doesn't have to be something that you agree with, but it has to at least be like something that you can accept, and it's not something that I accepted at all. Der Blue Angel is a landmark film, probably most famous for launching the international career of Marlene Dietrich, who went on to be one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. She stars in one of my favorite movies of all time called Witness for the Prosecution. In this film, she plays a cabaret dancer who seduces a repressed teacher. The repressed teacher is played by Emil Jennings, who was the first ever recipient of the Academy Award for Best Actor and the only German actor to ever win that award to date. Now, I think this movie is fantastic, and it's famous for the acting performance of Marlene Dietrich, but I think that lost in the sauce here is the amazing, absolutely emotional and fantastic acting from Emil Jennings. I personally think he's actually better in this film than Marlene Dietrich. I think his range is much better. I think he shows much more emotion. I think I feel for him so badly in this movie. I want him to succeed. I want him to live this life that he wants and that he deserves. Does it ultimately happen? I won't say that, but I think he is absolutely phenomenal in this film, and I wish he was more of a household name like Marlene Dietrich is. I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang is a movie that stars Paul Muni, who is one of the biggest stars of the 1930s. In this film, he plays a World War I veteran who is wrongfully convicted of a crime and sent to a brutal existence on a prison chain gang. Now, he eventually escapes and he becomes very successful, but he is constantly threatened by his previous life, and he might actually also get recaptured and put on a chain gang again, where his future is not as certain. I was rooting for him throughout this entire film. He is such a phenomenal actor. He is one of the best actors of the 1930s, and I think that this is one of his finest performances. I really love this movie. There's a car chase scene type of thing towards the end, which leaves you on the edge of your seat. I just think that this is absolutely phenomenal. Scarface, The Shame of a Nation, another Paul Muni film. I struggled whether to put this one ahead of I Am a Fugitive on a Chain Gang or to put that one ahead of this one, but Paul Muni is such an incredible actor, and I dare to say I prefer this film over the Al Pacino version. Don't get me wrong, I love Al Pacino. I think he's one of the greatest actors who ever lived, but Paul Muni is also a fantastic actor and one of the great actors of the 1930s. I love his rise through the mob. I love his ruthlessness, and then at the end, he is struck down by his own hubris, thinking that he is untouchable, thinking that he can do and get away with whatever he wants. This is just a phenomenal and impactful film, and I think it is absolutely fantastic. The Lady Vanishes is another film by my absolute favorite director, Alfred Hitchcock. In this film, we have a young woman who is on a train, and while she's on this train, she is aided, she is helped by an elderly woman. This old woman is the only one who will give her the time of day, the only one who will help her in her travels. And one day, the elderly woman just disappears. She cannot be found. The young lady knows that she has to be on the train somewhere because the train has not stopped. There has been no way for her to get off. But where is the elderly woman? Now, it's clear that there's some sort of cover-up going on here. People know where she is. They're just not telling where. Why is this happening? What's going on? I think that when we finally learn about where this woman is and who she is, it was a complete shock to me when I first saw it. And the ending, you think the ending is going to be dreadful, it is going to be terrible, but it ends up being a feel-good ending that I really enjoyed. I think Alfred Hitchcock just knows how to end a movie. Doing a good ending is one of the hardest things you can have in a movie because a lot of endings are really bad, but his endings are usually fantastic, and this is one of those examples. I love The Lady Vanishes. Modern Times is a film by Charlie Chaplin, who is one of my favorite directors, actors, and writers of all time. I believe what he was doing with silent films was so far ahead of what everyone else was doing that he was an absolute genius. In this film, it satirizes the struggles of modern industrial society. Charlie Chaplin is playing his tramp character. He works at a factory. It's incredibly dehumanizing. They treat him as if he's a number and not as if he's a person. He's just running this conveyor belt all day, and he's just expected to do it without any errors, without any rest, without stopping, and he's basically treated like he is a robot. He eventually meets this orphan woman. I don't think she has a name in this film, but her name in real life is Paulette Goddard. I believe at the time she was married to Charlie Chaplin in real life. They have like a 25-year age gap, which is something that he was kind of known for, was marrying much younger women. This is one of the Charlie Chaplin films that I think I've given the lowest scores to, and I really enjoy it. I think the writing is phenomenal. I think it is incredibly funny. Even though he's married to Paulette Goddard in real life, I didn't think that they had great on-screen chemistry. And normally, like with City Lights, where there's a lot of emotion with this girl, and the blind flower girl, and it's just dripping with emotion, and it's dripping with love and affection. I didn't feel that in this film. It just didn't have that same connection between the two characters to me, and for me, that is what makes a Charlie Chaplin film. So I still loved it, but not as much as, say, City Lights or The Kid, and The Gold Rush. I just think a lot of his other films are better than this, but I still really love this one. Dodsworth is an absolutely phenomenal emotional film. It is so different than other films that you would watch in the 1930s. It stars Walter Houston and Ruth Chatterton. Walter Houston is a man who owns his own automobile company, and he decides to retire because his wife wants to go on a trip to Europe, and she wants to live the retired life, and she's much younger than her husband, and she wants to go out there and live the life of a young, rich aristocrat, and she wants to have all the great things, and it's impossible for her to do that if her husband is constantly working all the time. Now, while they're on vacation, they realize that there's cracks in their marriage and that their marriage isn't really working out, and this leads his wife into basically leaving him and cheating on him with another man, and he ends up leaving her and going off with another woman. This movie is one of the earliest movies I've seen that deals with getting divorced and separation and the pain and anguish that comes with that, especially on the husband's side, because this was something that was, for him, was completely out of left field. His wife was someone who did like everything for him after she leaves him. He doesn't know where anything in the house is. He doesn't know how to get dressed properly. Like, his life completely falls apart after his wife leaves him. And then when he meets this new woman, he realizes that he has so much more living to do. He finally has found someone who he can enjoy his time with. And I just think that this is a very emotional, very well acted, fantastic film. I absolutely loved it. Stagecoach. I love Westerns. I also love John Wayne Westerns, even though I know today they are seen as very problematic because of the way they treat Native Americans. I still think that he is a phenomenal actor. This is the film that launched his career. This also stars Thomas Mitchell, who won Best Supporting Actor for his role in this film. He was the first male to win the Triple Crown of acting, and this is the movie that got him the Oscar for that Triple Crown. It also stars Claire Trevor, and this movie elevated the Western drama and has absolutely phenomenal cinematography. It's also just a little bit like the movie 12 Angry Men, where a lot of it is set into one space where a bunch of different people from different backgrounds get to know each other. We get to figure out who they are and their backstories and what makes them tick. Instead of a courtroom, this is in a carriage on its way through Indian, Native American territory, constantly getting fired upon. I just love this Western, and I think it's one of the better John Wayne Westerns that I have seen. The movie Freaks is probably best known for the line, "One of us, one of us, one of us." But it's actually also a very emotional, very touching film about a group of carnival sideshow people. Now, the actors that they used in real life were carnival sideshow type people. You have like conjoined twins, you have little people, you have like the hairy woman, you have like the really tall skinny guy. So they use real type of actors. This film is about a woman who is not of the carnival type build. She is considered to be like this very beautiful, very alluring woman, and she decides that she is going to marry one of the little people in the film for his inheritance. And once the other sideshow people figure out that she is just using him, they all kind of enact their revenge. And there's this specific scene at this wedding party where she really lays into him about being like a sideshow freak, and you can tell that all these years of him being called a freak and being treated differently for the person that he is, it really builds up emotionally inside of him. There's actually like a line where he says he just wants to be treated like a man and not like a child because he's an actual grown adult. And I think that this movie, it just strikes a chord with me about how much feeling and how much emotion this person has, and how being bullied and being teased your entire life for something that you personally can't control, something that you can't change, really affects the kind of person that you are. It's really sad. It's really tragic. Maybe I'm also starting to feel these type of feelings because I'm a father now and I don't want my child to be bullied, but I really love this movie a lot. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. The Baker's Wife is a French drama, and I think it is probably one of the greatest and best foreign films you may never have heard of. I've seen a lot of the foreign movies that are considered to be the top 100 greatest of all time, and I can't for the life of me understand why this film is not in that list. This movie is about a baker who moves into a small town. This town has been without a baker for a little while now. They've been forced to bake their own bread, and it has been absolutely abysmal and terrible. So this new baker has a young wife, and he moves to town, and this young wife ends up falling in love with someone her own age. She is a lot younger than her husband, and she ends up running off with him. And in the movie, we explore the 5 stages of grief. We explore how alcoholism can be a bad thing, which is not done a lot in the 1930s. Alcoholism is seen as a side character, and it's supposed to be like a funny thing. Like, oh, this guy's drinking, he's hilarious. Look at him do funny, crazy things while he's drunk. But this actually shows a more serious, more realistic version of what alcoholism can be. And the town is split because they think that this guy is funny. You think it's hilarious that his wife left him, but he decides that he doesn't want to bake anymore, and they have now tragically lost the only baker that they have in town, so they all band together to try to find and bring his wife back. And the acting performance of the guy who plays the baker, he just goes on an emotional roller coaster, and this film, such a great job. I think this movie is fantastic. I would watch it again if I found someone who was interested in watching a French drama from the 1930s about a baker. Definitely would be all in on this, watching it again. The Grand Illusion is a film directed by Jean Renoir. It stars Jean Gabin. It is an anti-war film set during World War I. I had to keep reminding myself while watching this film that it's set during World War I because it's right on the cusp of World War II, and it feels like it could be a World War II film. It has shared humanity from both sides of the war, and it has German characters portrayed sympathetically. It basically shows that both sides, when they're in this prisoner of war camp, they're able to get along with each other. They're able to have some sense of camaraderie together because they're humans. They're not just soldiers, but they're humans. They're people who share the same feelings, the same concerns, the same things in life, because they're people. And it basically knocks down this illusion of war, and I think that it is absolutely fantastic. The acting is phenomenal. The plot is fantastic. Great cinematography. I love this film. I think it is a great anti-war film. Taboo is a film from F.W. Murnau. This would be the last film that he would direct, as he would tragically pass away in an accident at the age of 42. This movie is considered to be one of the great last silent films ever made. It is a silent romance / adventure film. This movie is about forbidden, taboo love. It is one of my favorite love stories on this entire list from the 1930s. These two characters adore each other. They have a great passion for each other. They are the only two things in the world that they want are each other, and they just are not allowed to be together, so they have to try to find ways to be together, and it is a mesmerizing film. I absolutely love it. I recommend, if anyone can go find it, they should watch it. Queen Christina is an absolutely phenomenal film starring Greta Garbo. I think she is one of the greatest actresses who ever lived. It's sad that her career was cut short because she was kind of a recluse and she didn't like being in the limelight and she didn't really like Hollywood. So she left acting in like the 1940s. To everyone's surprise, this movie is often cited as the best performance she ever gave, and it's the first talkie film that she ever did. She was very prevalent during the silent film era as well. This movie also stars John Gilbert from The Big Parade, which was the highest grossing silent film ever. And I think that these two characters have fantastic chemistry together. I love the plot. I love the story. I love how their love for each other kind of blossoms as the movie goes along. At the end of the film, Queen Christina ends up making a decision. She has to choose basically of whether she wants to keep her crown and keep the loyalty of her people or pursue love. This also is kind of how her career went as well, right? She had the choice to either keep acting, keep her fans, keep the limelight, or pursue something that she was more interested in. At the end of the movie, she ends up making the right decision. I love this film. I think that she's absolutely phenomenal in it. Great acting all around. Queen Christina, I think it's Greta Garbo's best performance that I've ever seen her in. Pepe Le Moko is my favorite film from Gene Gabin, and it's not just because he is an amazing actor, because he absolutely is, but the plot of this film is incredible. It is tense. It'll keep you on the edge of your seat, and more importantly, it has a female lead who gives one of the greatest performances I have ever seen in my entire life. Now, if you look this movie up on IMDb, she is just buried in the credits, and I have no idea why. Her name is Olga Lord, and she plays the girlfriend of Pepe Le Moko, and she gives such a riveting, emotional performance. It is absolutely astonishing. Now, what this film is about is we have Pepe Le Moko and his girlfriend. They both live in the Casbah. He is a gangster, and he has all of his gangster friends around him. As long as he stays in the Casbah, he can't be arrested because they know the area really well. There's really tight quarters. It's really hard for the police to get in there to arrest him. So he's set as long as he stays in the Casbah. So obviously that's the solution, right? But he ends up falling in love with someone who is not his girlfriend, and he ends up getting stir crazy, and he feels like he has to leave the Casbah. He has no choice. He needs to get out. He's been there for too long. He wants to see the world around him. He's wasting his life. He's withering away. He just needs to leave. Now, of course, his girlfriend tries to convince him not to do this, but he does it anyway, and it leads up to one of the greatest films I've ever seen in my entire life. The Night at the Opera is one of only two Marx Brothers films on this list, and I think that is absolutely criminal. I personally find the Marx Brothers to be hilarious, except for maybe Harpo, which I don't always understand what he's doing, but the other Marx Brothers I find to be absolutely hilarious. Now, this is the first film without Zeppo, and that is tragic for me because besides Groucho and Checo, Zeppo is probably my third favorite. He plays off of Groucho so well in all the movies that he's in, and for me, this is a huge loss. Now, besides that, this has a lot of really fast, funny comedy in it. Two of the most famous Marx Brothers scenes are in this film. One is the Sanity Clause, which is probably my favorite, and the other is the stateroom scene where they gradually stuff more and more people into one singular small room, which creates hilarious hijinks. This movie is funny. It is one of the funniest comedies I've ever seen, and I absolutely adore it. If I were asked to come up with a list of my top 10 favorite comedies of all time, Bringing Up Baby would definitely be somewhere on this list. I love this screwball comedy. The jokes come at you rapid fire. It is just absolutely hilarious. It stars one of my favorite actresses of all time, Katharine Hepburn. I actually jump back and forth between her and Barbara Stanwyck trying to decide who is my favorite actress of all time, but she is definitely either one or two. It also stars Cary Grant, who historically I am not a huge fan of, but this movie kind of changed my mind a little bit on him. And I think he's great when he stars opposite Katharine Hepburn. I've also seen them together in a movie called Holiday, which I thought was also phenomenal. But this movie is just funny all the way through. There is a specific scene where Katharine Hepburn is pretending like she's being attacked by Baby, and she like is on the phone with Cary Grant, and she falls over a table, and she's like wailing, "Oh no, he's attacking me!" And it's just hilarious. It's Katharine Hepburn's first comedy, and she just knocks it completely out of the park. Peter Ibbotson is a movie that maybe a lot of people haven't heard of, and I think that is absolutely tragic because it is a phenomenal film with some of the best child acting I've seen in a very long time, and I feel like child acting can either really make or break a film, and for this one it absolutely makes it. It stars Gary Cooper and Anne Harding, and essentially we have two kids who are very young. They have a crush on each other. They end up having feelings for each other. They are split apart, and as adults they have very different lives, but they run into each other again. Now Gary Cooper's character is put in prison, and they are only able to kind of communicate with each other through their dreams. They can see each other when they fall asleep. They interact with each other in their dreams. So they basically have a complete separate life away from their real life with each other while they are dreaming. And this movie is emotional. It tugs at your heartstrings. It is a beautiful love story. I actually think the love story with the children is just as emotional as the love story with the adults. And I think this film is phenomenal. If you haven't seen this movie or you've never heard of it, I definitely recommend seeing it. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I don't think anyone needs a plot synopsis for this. Everyone knows what this movie is about. It's one of Disney's earliest animated films. It gets a lot of critique because the prince in this movie is very one note. He doesn't have a lot to do. The relationship between Snow White and him aren't really fleshed out. You don't really feel like they have a connection to each other. But I think the real love story in this film is between Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the impact that she has on their lives, the impact that they have on her lives and her life. And I think this film is phenomenal. I love the old style art in it, and I love the music. All the songs in this film are iconic, and I just really adore old Disney movies, and this is probably one of my favorites. So I realized while putting this video together that I never did a short review of the movie M, so I'm going to try to do a quick, off-the-cuff, no preparation review of the film M. It stars Peter Lorre, and he is the first ever child serial killer ever put to film. What's unique about this movie is that while he's kidnapping and killing all of these children in town, the police are kind of swarming trying to find him. They're all over the city, and because they're all over the city, the regular criminals who are doing criminal acts aren't able to get anything done because the police are everywhere. So they decide that they're going to band together to try to catch this child murderer, while the cops are also trying to catch the child murderer. So both groups are trying to catch him, and it is tense. It is very on the edge of your seat. Peter Lorre gives an absolutely amazing speech at the end of the film. It's probably one of the finer pieces of acting you will ever see put to screen. He does an absolutely chilling and amazing job, and I think that this is a fantastic film. Mutiny on the Bounty, starring Clark Gable and Charles Laughton as Captain Bligh. I think Charles Laughton is one of the greatest villains in movie history in this film. He is just a terrible person throughout the entire movie, and I am absolutely there for it, and I love it. He is a phenomenal actor. He also is a great director, given he only directed one movie, and that movie was The Night of the Hunter. So I think he's just phenomenal at everything he does. He's a fantastic villain, and I thought this movie, although it's long, I thought it was one of the better pirate slash on the ocean at sea films that I have ever seen in my life. Up in One Night is directed by one of my favorite directors, of all time, Frank Capra. It stars Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. Claudette Colbert is a rich heiress, and Frank Capra is a cynical reporter, and the two fall in love while traveling. I think it is a great love story. It is incredibly funny. I just love Frank Capra's direction. I love what he does with love stories, and I think that this is a fantastic film. The Adventures of Robin Hood is an extremely fun movie, and it looks absolutely amazing. In a world that was still drowned out by black and white, this movie was in color, and the colors were vibrant. They popped, and they looked absolutely amazing. It looked like I was watching a film from like the 1950s. That's how great this movie holds up. That's how just amazing the cinematography is. That's just how phenomenal this movie looks. Not only that, it has three of the biggest actors of Hollywood at the time, Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, and Claude Rains. They all deliver spectacular performances. This is probably, honestly, the best Robin Hood movie I've ever seen. Besides like Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is a comedy, this is and it's a great spoof of this film, by the way, but this is probably the greatest Robin Hood movie I've ever seen. It is just spectacular, and it's on a level that was unheard of for the 1930s. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town is yet another film directed by Frank Capra. It stars Gary Cooper and Jean Arthur. It is about a very simple, small-town man who inherits $20 million, and for some reason he needs to go to New York. And when he gets to New York, it's the big city. It's something that he's not used to. Now, there is a news reporter there, played by Jean Arthur, who originally mocks him for being like this country bumpkin, but eventually they fall in love with each other. And it's just a great film about a man who is simple, who doesn't necessarily want the money or needs the money, but he falls into the situation that he really can't control, and he ends up falling in love with the wrong person. And I just think that this is a great love story. The end of the movie, it's a courtroom scene, and I think it is just Jean Arthur really carries the last part of the film, and I think she does an absolutely phenomenal job with it. I think it has great acting, great directing, and it's just a film that I absolutely love. Duck Soup is considered to be the Marx Brothers' greatest film. It is not only hilarious, it's not only funny, but it has political undertones, it has critiques of war, it actually has a plot, and it actually has some sort of meaning behind it, which a lot of their movies didn't. A lot of their movies were just zany and funny and kind of vaudevillian, but this one actually has a deeper meaning to it. We have the fake countries of Fredonia and Sylvania going to war with each other. This is also Zeppo's last film that he made with the Marx Brothers, so that's also some history there. Like I said, when I reviewed A Night at the Opera, I absolutely love Zeppo. I think he is part of the glue that holds this troupe together. So I also think this film is fantastic, and I love the fact that there is a deeper meaning behind the antics and the zaniness, and there's some critiques of war there. I just think it's also their greatest film ever made, even though it's not my favorite. Animal Crackers is my favorite, but I do think that this film is hilarious and important for their careers. Make Way for Tomorrow. So for anyone who tells me that Grave of the Fireflies is the most sad and depressing film ever made, I always ask them, have you seen Make Way for Tomorrow? Because I think that this is up there as the most sad and depressing movie I've ever seen. It asks the question, as a child, what sort of financial responsibilities do you have for your parents, especially if you are also struggling yourself? We have two elderly parents in this film who are on the brink of losing their house, and they're reaching out to their children to see if they can get some kind of help from them, or to see if they can live with their children for a period of time until they can get back on their feet. Each child has an excuse as to why they can't, And this is also a Thomas Mitchell vehicle. He's also in this film, but he's not like the main star of it. But they all have a reason as to why they can't. And the parents end up getting split up into different children's homes, and they're not able to see each other, and they are incredibly depressed because they've lived their whole lives together and now they're separated. And it's just, and the ending is so tragic. The ending, I was really hoping that this film would end on a light positive note, but it just doesn't. It's just sad and depressing the whole way through, and it really affected me in a way that a lot of movies don't, because I feel like this is kind of how my family is and was. And I think when it hits home like that, it especially is very depressing. And I really thought this movie was absolutely phenomenal. I thought it was amazing. City Lights is another Charlie Chaplin film. I absolutely love Charlie Chaplin as a director, as a writer, as an actor. He is a triple threat. I think he is one of the greatest Hollywood has ever seen. In this film, he plays his tramp character. He falls in love with a blind girl who sells flowers, and his lot in life is to try to get a job and try to save up money to help her get a surgery that will help her no longer be blind. The two characters have great chemistry with each other. It is a fantastic, heartwarming, tragic love story. And like I said, he is such a great writer. His comedies are funny, but they're also endearing. They also tug at your heartstrings. It's just something that no one else was doing at this time, and he just did it better than everyone else, in my opinion. He is an absolute genius for me, and I don't know if I've ever given any of his movies anything lower than a 9, because I just think he is an absolutely phenomenal at everything he does. Shin Nu, which translates into the goddess in English, is honestly one of the greatest silent films I've ever seen in my life. In fact, it's probably a top 10 silent film. It is so emotional. It is so gut-wrenching. It is so heartbreaking. It is like a punch to your stomach. I am not too proud to say that I was absolutely in tears by the end of the film. That is how amazing that it is. This is a movie out of China. It is about a woman who during the day is a devoted mother, but by night she is a prostitute who is struggling trying to give her child the life that she never had. Now, by chance, she comes under the protection of a criminal boss who ends up assaulting her, and he makes life really, really hard for her and her child. She ends up trying to escape him, but it's not as easy as she would think. And like I said, she's just trying to have this life for her child that her child never had. And it's a very tragic, very heartbreaking ending. And I think it is honestly one of the most emotional films I've ever seen. And because of that, is one of the greatest movies I think ever made. King Kong is, of course, one of the most iconic characters in movie history. In fact, if you go to New York and you go to the Empire State Building, you can still see him there. He's all over the place. This film, for its time, had some of the greatest special effects ever seen. I don't understand how this movie wasn't nominated for Best Picture. It was incredibly groundbreaking. The story is emotional, it's touching, it tugs at your heartstrings. You are rooting for King Kong the entire time. It has great battle scenes between him and other creatures, a fantastic love story. It just has everything that you could want in a movie, and it is just so well acted. I love this movie. I didn't care that King Kong looked dated. I didn't care that today the special effects look worse than you would see in a video game. It doesn't matter to me. This movie is just so fantastic. I couldn't give it anything but a 10 out of 10. Stella Dallas is a film starring Barbara Stanwyck as a working class woman who marries a wealthy man. They end up having a child together. At first, in my opinion, she is not the greatest mother to this child. She is all about herself. She's all about living a rich life, about looking wealthy, about feeling wealthy, about doing things that make her feel like she's big and important. But later on in the film, she ends up realizing that her daughter is more important and that she needs to make some sort of sacrifice to ensure that her daughter lives a happy life. Now, Barbara Stanwyck is absolutely phenomenal in this film. Great performance. Probably one of the greatest performances I've ever seen her in. It's very close between this and The Lady Eve. She's also absolutely phenomenal in The Lady Eve, but I tend to navigate towards films that affect me on an emotional level, and having two daughters and wanting the best for them and wanting them to have more than what I had growing up. And I would likely also make a sacrifice for them if I had to ensure that they grew up happy and healthy. This just really affected me. There's also points in this film where the daughter has a birthday party and no one shows up, which also I was almost in tears at that point because I was thinking, what if that happened to my daughter? If I had a birthday party for her and no one showed up, how that affected her? And I start trying to see this movie through her eyes and how sad and depressed that would make her. And this movie just speaks to me. I really can understand what the mother is going through and maybe what the child's going through as well. And I just think this is an absolutely phenomenal film. I don't think my top four for the 1930s is going to be that controversial. These are films that are absolutely iconic, that are spectacular, and I think a lot of people would have these in their top four. It's just like we would put them in different spots probably. Number four for me, even though it's controversial because of its racism, number four is Gone with the Wind. This movie just looks incredible. There's so many scenes in this film where you could just have it as a painting on your wall. The cinematography is beautiful. This is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen in my entire life in terms of cinematography. Also, you have Vivien Leigh, who this is a 4-hour film and she's in every second of the 4 hours and she commands the screen the entire time. She is captivating. She is mesmerizing. She keeps you on the edge of your seat. How does an actress do that for 4 hours? It's absolutely amazing. It's phenomenal. It's mind-boggling what she does. This for me is a top 10 performance by an actress in movie history. In fact, I did a top 10 performance by actresses in movie history, and this was on that list. She is just so good in this film. This is an all-time role for a film. It also stars Clark Gable, who is also very good. Thomas Mitchell, who I argue probably had one of the greatest years of anyone in the history of cinema in 1939. He was in this, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He was in Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he was in Stagecoach and Only Angels Have Wings. I mean, come on, what a year for him. But this movie is phenomenal. It does have a lot of racism in it, sure, but all the positives are just so positive. I couldn't give it anything lower than 4. It's just a mesmerizing movie to watch, and I absolutely loved it. Number 3 is one of the most iconic films of all time, The Wizard of Oz. This movie looks gorgeous. It looks phenomenal. There's a scene in this film that's in black and white where Dorothy is in Kansas. She opens the door, and when she opens the door, we are just thrown into Technicolor. This Technicolor pops, it enters your room, and it consumes you, and it makes you feel warm and wonderful inside because of how absolutely vibrant and brilliant it looks. It also has some of the greatest characters in movie history: the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, the Scarecrow, some of the greatest songs and music ever recorded in cinema, and one of the greatest, if not the greatest, villain in cinema history. This movie just has it all. There's a reason why it's still iconic today. There's a reason why it's held up so well. It is just a perfect film in every single way. Number 2 is another Frank Capra film. This stars James Stewart, Claude Rains, Thomas Mitchell, and Jean Arthur. I consider this to be the movie that made me fall in love with films, and a big reason for that is the acting performance by James Stewart. I think this is one of the greatest acting performances ever put to film. And I think what gets lost in this movie also is because he was so good, because his performance is so iconic, because he delivered his lines better than anyone else in the history of cinema, we forget how great Claude Rains is in this film also. He goes toe to toe with James Stewart in this film. I think his acting is just as good. I think he puts on just as spectacular a performance, and I think at the end of the day, this is one of the most important films in the history of the world because it talks about the filibuster. It talks about how government can be greedy and can be corrupt, and it also delivers some of the greatest directing, some of the greatest acting ever in the history of movies. I love this film. I will praise this film for the rest of my life. I will praise James Stewart and Claude Rains for the rest of my life. I think that this film is just absolutely phenomenal. Number 1 for the 1930s is actually one of the first films that I've reviewed for the 1930s. It is called All Quiet on the Western Front, one of the greatest anti-war films ever made. I really love how this movie shows a group of young kids who are motivated, who are kind of cocky, who think they're just going to go into this war and show the other side what's up. It's just going to be super easy, and they're going to have this great time, and all their teachers and everyone tells them that this is just going to be something that they need to do. It's going to be something that their country wants them to do. They're patriotic. They're all into this, and then they realize how horrific and how terrible war actually is. Lou Ayres gives one of the greatest performances ever as Paul. This movie is just haunting. It is emotional. It is tragic. It is one of the greatest war movies ever made. I was just drawn into it, how just absolutely devastating it is, and I just thought it was the best film from the 1930s. And Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is one of my favorite films of all time, and I just thought that this was actually better. It was just so touching and so moving, and it really shows the impact that war has on society, and I just thought it was fantastic.